Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest on what's going on up in the stratosphere. As it's looking increasingly likely we see a major stratospheric warming over the course of the next couple of weeks towards the end of this month and start of February, and even a high chance now of seeing a sudden stratospheric warming where we see those zonal mean winds above the North Pole reverse to easterly, i.e. get below 0 meters per second. And again, that could potentially bring very cold weather once again into February, as again, a sudden stratospheric warming would propagate these negative anomaly zonal mean winds throughout the atmosphere, increasing the chance of blocking, weakening the jet stream, and creating a lot more amplification, and that all could contribute to colder spells of weather into February and could even extend out into the spring as well. So in today's video, we'll run through what the latest GFS operational chart is showing. We'll have a look at the ensemble members. We'll have a look at the charts showing the slice through the atmosphere of the GFS operational run. Again, that could indicate how it does propagate through the atmosphere. And then we'll have a look at the latest ECMWF charts that just came out yesterday. Look at the weekly anomalies and the ensembles for that as well. And again, all of them are suggesting a major warming, with some suggesting a sudden stratospheric warming. In the second half of the video, we'll have a look at what we normally do on a daily basis, look at the live radar, look at the UKV, and then have a look at the longer range models as well, including the ensemble members, again, to see what's happening over the course of the next couple of weeks, as it's remaining fairly dry and fairly cold for the next week or so, and then there's big uncertainty. Some runs bring some westerly winds back in, others keeping that higher pressure to our north, and potentially bringing much colder air back in from the north or the east. And again, all of these things do link together, because in around 7 to 10 days' time, we may start to see the impact of the warming in the stratosphere coming through to the troposphere. So again, these things all do interlink, and we'll have to see how it does play out over the course of the next couple of weeks. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So do start on the latest GFS operational run, looking at temperatures up in the stratosphere. You can see the polar vortex is relatively strong right now, but it is strung out. It is elongated by two small areas of warming, one coming up from Europe and one coming up from Alaska and Siberia. But these are no major warmings. Major warming, we get up towards freezing at 10 HPA or even higher than that, penetrating all the way into the North Pole. Now, if you run on, you can see the polar vortex actually gets a bit more organised, and then you see a major warming starting to appear by early next week across parts of Siberia and Russia, and it initially tries to penetrate into the Arctic and doesn't have too much success, but those warmer temperatures do get in to the North Pole, which is just to the north of Svalbard there and Greenland, so getting towards sort of minus 30 degrees. That is quite a warm anomaly, but nothing ridiculous, and those zonal mean winds would be reducing in speeds significantly, but not to a sudden stratospheric warming level. But if we run it on, we see another significant warming just towards the start of February, and this absolutely demolishes the polar vortex. Now, if you've checked out a YouTube reel I posted yesterday, a YouTube short, sorry, I posted yesterday, or last night really, for the 6 o'clock run in the evening, you see another similar chart to this where the GFS operational run obliterated the polar vortex, and on today's midnight run it is done the same thing, with that polar vortex completely getting demolished, and over the North Pole those temperatures are well above average. Again, you have to keep an eye on those 10 HPA winds, and you can see they are still there, but right over the North Pole they do get reversed for a time. You can see look how significantly strong they are here. Right now, you go right to the end of the run, so much smaller and displaced. Now, there's no split in the polar vortex here. That is one thing some people have highlighted as an important factor that could enhance cold weather risk for the UK. But again, these things are not exact science. Sudden stratospheric warmings only happen every couple of years, and we've only really been measuring them for the last few decades. We don't actually have a lot of sample sizes to take on. So yes, statistically, some would argue that a split in the polar vortex would bring a higher chance of colder weather than displacement, which is this is showing, where the polar vortex gets shoved off the North Pole, but not split into different pieces. But again, we can't say anything with too much certainty with that, just because it is not. We haven't got all the data we possibly can with it, and it's more of a statistical chance than an actual science chance with that. Now, if we do go over to the ensemble members here, again, you can see where it is at the moment, well above average. The black line there is the mean for this time of year. And you can see all ensemble members from the GFS, which are these green lines, drop well below average, down towards around 10 meters per second at 10 HPA. Some respond and recover the polar vortex back towards average, but many get us very weak, if not well below zero. Maybe a quarter to potentially a third at some point get us to zero or lower. That is a sudden stratospheric warming. But remember, even if we don't see a sudden stratospheric warming, a general weakening in the polar vortex will propagate through the atmosphere and will allow more blocking, or a higher chance of blocking and more amplification of the jet stream, and a slowing of the westerly flow throughout the atmosphere. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's no chance of cold weather if we don't see it officially turn to a sudden stratospheric warming. It just would bring higher chances if we did. So we'll have to see, of course, how it does play out. But again, these risks are increasing, but pretty much every run we see, more and more are going lower in those zonal mean winds. And again, we'll have to just see what happens. But at the moment, a major warming is likely, potentially sudden stratospheric warming. And you can see this better on the GFS operational run we just looked at through the slice through the atmosphere. So you can see on the left-hand side on the y-axis the pressure levels. So right at the bottom is sort of surface level, and then right up in the atmosphere. High up in the atmosphere towards the troposphere, top of the troposphere into the stratosphere, getting towards 30 HPA, 10 HPA, and 1 HPA. And you see right up in the atmosphere, top of the atmosphere, where our weather takes place, you can see those zonal mean winds do get significantly reduced, and you can see a reversal in the zonal mean winds up in the stratosphere from around the last few days of January all the way to February. 2 warmings appearing here. And you can see it does propagate through the atmosphere for a time, but again, we'll have to wait and see what would happen beyond that. But you can see generally a very big weakening in the zonal mean winds, and that's why, yes, the models at the moment are flirting with more substantial blocking, more cold weather, but things can rapidly evolve as this propagates through the atmosphere. And that's why keep an eye on those models over the course of the next week or so is going to be very, very important. More importantly, if you look to the right, you can see the anomaly charts here, again showing right up in the top of the stratosphere. Those zonal mean winds are 60 meters per second slower than normal at one point. And you can see the blues are moving through the atmosphere, showing negative anomalies are moving through, and you'd expect to see some of these darker blues shift southwards as well. And if we did see that at the surface through early to middle of February, you'd expect to see substantial blocking and a higher risk of colder weather. Now remember, we can't guarantee cold weather comes towards the UK. There will be multiple spills of cold air out of the Arctic if we saw a sudden stratospheric warming, or at least a major warming. But whether it will exactly hit the UK, we'll have to wait and see. But it does substantially increase the risk. So again, models are staying on this theme of a major warming. Now, if you go over to the ECMWF and have a look at their anomaly charts, you can see they already have quite a substantial warming appearing throughout the next week over Siberia. So these are the weekly anomalies from the ECMWF charts, again from all their ensemble members, again showing the average sort of temperature in an anomaly form over the North Pole. If you move on to the first week of February, you can see that's when the ECMWF weekly mean anomalies are showing the polar vortex again obliterated, really. Darker reds showing very warm air for the stratosphere right above the North Pole, and that continues all the way to the end of February, where eventually it looks like the polar vortex may form or may move back towards the North Pole. And again, that may be too late to change the fate of winter as we head towards the last week of February. But again, very interesting, this showing in the longer term, those warm anomalies staying for a period of time. So it could increase any longevity of any blocking spells. And again, can't say for certain what that will replicate in the troposphere towards the surface, but it would very much be against the status quo of westerly winds. That would be very unlikely, or at least we could see westerly winds, but you'd be thinking there's substantial blocking around, and there'll be very interesting charts going along with that, showing different sorts of scenarios. So we'll have to see, but this could be quite a game changer for the second half of the winter. We are on a trend of generally cold weather at the moment, but this could substantially increase the risk of that staying the theme and potentially getting even more severe and widespread. Now, after you finish, but just look at the ECMWF line charts for their ensemble members. You can see we're well above average in the zonal mean winds at the moment. So yeah, these are the zonal mean winds, remember. So again, below zero here is a sudden stratospheric warming. Anywhere below this thick red line is well below average. So you can see very, very strong at the moment, but trending well below average for the last few days of January, a good around 10 to maybe even 15 meters per second below average. So even if just the average of the zonal mean winds here from the ensemble members came off, none of these more extreme runs, we'd still be thinking there would be an enhanced risk of more amplification of the jet stream and more blockings just because we have a weak polar vortex. But maybe a third to a quarter go below that zero line, which would be the level for a sudden stratospheric warming. And of course, the same data going into those weekly mean anomaly charts, you can see that the polar vortex zonal mean winds remain well below average all the way to the start of March from the majority of the ensemble members. Again, showing there will be a longevity to this. Sometimes you can see these warmings and even sudden stratospheric warmings, but we go below the sort of the average or down towards zero for a few days before it does respond. Here, it looks like it's quite a substantial warming lasting a long period of time. Now, of course, any of these warmer or stronger ensemble members can come off, but at the moment, most are keeping us very weak through pretty much the whole of February and pretty much the whole of the end of meteorological winter. Again, spicing things up tremendously. So again, we'll have to see how this does play out. Can't give any guarantees, but definitely I'd say there's an above average chance of colder weather through February. Could be quite substantially colder weather through February. And again, we'll keep you updated what's actually going on in the stratosphere. Things are pretty much consolidating, and we did another update on the stratosphere on Tuesday in a dedicated video. And if you saw that, we saw very similar charts to this, if not, and actually getting a little bit more of a stronger impression for a major warming or sudden stratospheric warming, and it's coming shorter into the time frame as well. That is the big important thing. As over the last couple of weeks, it's stayed in sort of the extended range. We've even seen hints of this at the start of January. We did a couple of videos on it at the start of January, looking at the suggestion of a sudden stratospheric warming, but it's now coming in sort of the 10-day time frame from a lot of the ensemble members and operational runs. So it does mean there is a high chance now of a major warming and quite a substantial chance of a sudden stratospheric warming, all giving an increased risk of cold weather into February. So we do now have a look at what we do on a daily basis. If we go over to the Weather Channel and have a look at the live radar at the moment, it's another cold day out there, but showers are significantly reduced with higher pressure building in. The air is slightly milder, with a milder wedge of air pushing in over the course of the last 24 hours in the southwest. Again, that is propagating further northwards and eastwards, but making very slow progress of it and giving max temperatures today around that sort of 3 to 6 degree mark. And again, could be a few inch showers along the North Sea coast, but again, not expecting anything substantial at all, as we are under a ridge of high pressure. Look at the temperatures, a little bit milder today, still cold in the north where we have snow cover, but most areas it's average to slightly below average for the time of year, with those temperatures, as I said, around that 3 to 6 degree mark, and it will be turning milder from the south and the west. You can see these yellows are appearing, and again, there's indicated temperatures getting more towards average. Still, though, the far east looks likely to hold on to that cold air all the way potentially to sort of Tuesday, Wednesday time, before eventually the mild wedge does edge in, and even then it will only bump temperatures up to around average, maybe slightly above average for a day or two before we go colder once again under an inversion. So if we do go over to the weather outlook and have a look at the UKV, you can see the precipitation edging into the south and the west last night into the early hours of this morning. And again, it did give some rain in places, but just generally a bit of cloud and generally milder air. Through today, it's another dry day, a few clouds here or there, but pretty pleasant. The worst conditions really across the southern parts of the Republic of Ireland, where there's some patchy showers and rain and just generally thicker cloud. But it is turning milder there. Over the course of this evening, a few clouds here or there, but nothing too much, and some rain trying to push into the west. Maybe a bit of snow over the higher ground, but just generally light to moderate rain pushing in on the weather front. But that weather front's getting squeezed by the higher pressure and losing all its intensities. Beyond that, into Saturday afternoon, again, a dry day further south and eastwards with cloud free as well. And again, you can see where that cloud dividing line is. That's the dividing line between slightly milder air and the cold air, with giving temperatures still in the low single digits and below freezing overnight. As we head into Sunday, again, another weather front bumps in, and you can see that cloud edge gets further eastwards as that cold air is getting nudged away. But all the way into Tuesday, we still hang on to some cold air in the far southeast. And again, it's difficult to see on the live radar, on the precipitation charts, but we'll show you the upper air temperatures in a minute and you'll be able to see how it does hang on. And all the way into Wednesday, a bit of precipitation in the north and west, but still holding on to some colder air in the south and the east. And you can see that in the upper air temperatures. We remain pretty cold all the way through Sunday, potentially into Monday. And you see the upper air temperatures stay around freezing, but by around Tuesday, Wednesday time, they start to warm up. But we don't see, as this is, of course, 850 HPA, one slice in the atmosphere. Towards the surface, it actually remains a lot colder. Look at the dew point, still well below freezing, indicating dry, cold air at the surface. And we'll run through the 2 meter temperatures now, and you'll be able to see that it does remain cold, even though those upper air temperatures are rising. And again, just showing you an inversion taking place under the higher pressure. This afternoon, as I said, widely temperatures 3 to 6 degrees, slightly milder further southwards and westwards. Overnight tonight, another widespread frost through England, Wales and Scotland. However, for Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, above freezing with milder air pushing in. Through Saturday, again, another cold day for central areas, maybe only 1 to 3 degrees there, elsewhere maybe 5 or 6, and again, milder through the Republic of Ireland, maybe getting up to 10 degrees in places. Through Saturday night into Sunday, again, a widespread frost, but reducing in Scotland and far west of Wales and southwest England, but still very cold through East England, -4 or -5 there, and into Sunday afternoon, you can see again temperatures struggling around 2 to 5 degrees there. Through Sunday night, another widespread frost into Monday, and by Monday afternoon, again, still 3 or 4 degrees, but by this time, the milder air up in the up around 850 HPA is pushing in, but towards the surface, we're not seeing that. Through central England into the early hours of Tuesday, we have clearer skies, again, -3 or -4, an inversion taking place, and it could even be even colder through Tuesday, 2 or 3 degrees there, and then again into Wednesday. Very cold overnight once again in the south and the east. Again, just showing you what happens when you get cold air embedded at the surface, higher pressure coming in, allowing not a lot of mixing of air, and even when you get warmer upper air temperatures coming in, it stays cold at the surface. So some areas in the south and the east are going to stay in this cold pattern of temperatures around 4 or 5 degrees in the day and well below freezing overnight. Again, slightly below average in the day and well below average overnight, staying very cold. Of course, there's no wintry risk with this. If we did see any instability, it would start mixing the air, and you'd expect then those temperatures to rise. But it's going to be dry, but it's going to be pretty cold indeed. Further northwards and westwards, though, it's going to be slightly warmer. A bit of a reverse of what we've had through the first half of January, where it was much colder in the north than in the south. South and the east is going to be a lot colder than the north and the west is into early next week. Now, if we do go and over to the GFS and see what that's showing over the course of the next couple of weeks, again, you can see higher pressure building in, a bit of an easterly flow trying to push in. Again, that's holding that inversion in the south and the east. And again, the higher pressure does try and push northwards and builds in a temporary northeasterly wind there towards the end of next week. But again, nothing too substantial. For eventually, that high pressure does get flattened a bit. There are still a lot of signs from some ensemble members and operational runs, not this 6 o'clock run, but other operational runs, of that high pressure getting further northwards. But this is where there is a lot of uncertainty. And if we did see that stratospheric warming start to propagate through the atmosphere, it could help the blocking a bit here, where this high pressure tries to extend in the Arctic, but just gets flattened by the westerly flow. And so if that westerly flow does get decreased in strength, we could see these charts rapidly change for the start of February. But here we go quite mild and westerly with big Atlantic systems. But if you look over the northern hemisphere, blocking is starting to appear. Again, could be signs of the stratospheric warming starting to propagate through. But again, we'll have to see that nearer the time. When it does properly propagate through, it will become abundantly obvious. So we'll have to see when that does happen. If you look at the GEM, see how that does compare. Again, high pressure building in, a bit of an easterly flow early next week, keeping that cold air around. And we try and see cold air come around that high pressure. And at day 10, we actually start to pull a bit of a northerly wind. This is extending the high pressure further northwards with quite cold air running down the eastern side of the country, around the -10 isotherm, potentially pushing in through eastern areas. And again, if we look at the northern hemisphere view, trying to see blocking extending into the Arctic, lobes of tropospheric polar vortex extending towards North America, Europe, and out towards eastern Russia, and out towards Siberia, again showing that there's going to be some disturbances of the tropospheric polar vortex. But we'll have to see what happens here. Again, similar to the GFS at day 10, but the GFS just has that higher pressure getting flattened, whereas the GEM actually starts pulling colder air. And you can see how very subtle shifts in the pressure pattern and the strength of those zonal mean winds can substantially change what we get at the surface. Now, if we look at the ECMWF, again, higher pressure building in at the moment, a bit of an easterly flow. That high pressure extending northwards, seeing a brief northerly wind next week, but gets flattened, and we see a westerly flow push in. You look towards the northern hemisphere view, and pretty locked in tropospheric polar vortex there, a bit of high pressure right above the pole, but other than that, flat westerly through our side of the northern hemisphere. So again, no suggestion of anything blocking or majorly cold there at all. So you can see all three models do have different scenarios, and again, they are flip-flopping between each run. So we'll have to see how it does develop, but there is definitely a chance we stay pretty cold for at least another week, maybe longer. But as you can see from the ECMWF here and from the GFS, especially in the longer range, wet and windy weather could arrive for the last couple of days of January. But I wouldn't put too much weight into that yet, because things are still rapidly changing. If we finish by looking at the ensemble members, look at the latest GFS, you can see below average the next few days, and we go above average, but again, that doesn't reflect for the surface conditions as you saw from the UKV, and then we actually trend below average towards the end of January and start of February. Again, no signs of a flat westerly flow there. Again, this ensemble run hasn't fully come out. It's come out to the next 11 or 12 days, but it stays relatively below average in the longer term. And if we go back to the midnight run, you can see well below average in the longer term, again suggesting perhaps more Arctic air masses pushing in. No signs of mild, wet and windy with the precipitation still relatively weak in the longer term. So again, it does suggest the ECMWF and the GFS operational run in the longer term are a little bit outliers in terms of producing mild, wet and windy. However, if we do go to the ECMWF charts, you can see a lot of them are quite a bit milder in the longer term, but still a low precipitation signal. Again, potentially indicating higher pressure building in, and the orientation of that higher pressure, for the south at least, giving milder air. Again, we'll have to see what happens. You can see there's a lot of volatility here, and of course, the stratospheric warming will come into play within the troposphere and these models, of course, within the next probably week or two as we head into the first week of February. So anything really beyond the next 10 days, I'd say could be very dramatic shifts. And again, we'll have to see how it does play out. So anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you keep up to date with what's going on, both with the day-to-day weather, of course, and what is going on in the stratosphere, as it could really spice up the last month of winter. We'll have to see how it does play out. But if you are looking for cold weather, potentially a very good update today. But if you're looking for mild weather, probably not the best update, really. And if you're looking for dry weather, well, at least it'll be dry for the next week or so. We'll have to see what happens beyond that. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you again for another video soon.